Hello everyone and welcome to hyzerflight. This is a new channel and this is the first video I'm posting on here. So let's get right into it. We're going to take a look at last weekend's 2021 Portland Open. We're going to dive into the course, we're going to look at some of the notable holes, and then we're going to go and look at some of the player statistics over the weekend and see if there's anything interesting, any interesting stats or conclusions that we can draw just from the eye test, watching the coverage as well. The tournament all unfolded at the Glendoveer Disc Golf Course in Portland, Oregon. There's a lot to be said just about how the course was planned and the event all came about. Initially, it was going to be held at the Blue Lake course, but due to COVID restrictions, the Disc Golf Pro Tour was forced to go with the Glendoveer property. And I'm not exactly sure why they were forced to go with this property, why this was their only choice, but I'm sure there was a good reason for it, and it seems like they did the best that they could do given the circumstances. It seemed like a well-run event, and so, major hats off to the DGPT and others for making the event run well. So if you didn't hear, basically, Dustin Keegan, who is a touring pro, he came in and created the course in a matter of days. And I know there was a lot of differing opinions on the property. The obvious point of contention and the thing that I think some people had a problem with, I know Paul Macbeth mentioned it on his Instagram story prior to the tournament, and that is that we are having yet another tournament on a ball golf course. And I'm not here to kind of debate ball golf versus, traditional wooded disc golf courses. I think that's a good topic for another video. But I am going to look at the course and kind of discuss my thoughts on it. So in general, the course was, I think, relentlessly long, measuring out at 12,696 feet. So we're looking here at an overview of the course, and when I first looked in the caddy book and saw this overview of the course, it initially seems like a really well-designed track that uses the property creatively and to its fullest extent. It starts, from hole 1 and, returns back to the clubhouse at hole 18. And, just looking at this, it looks like it's really, really well designed. It looks like it's using a good use of the property. And I think that Dustin Keegan did a really good job. I think he did the best with what he had ultimately. So any, criticism of the course are not really directed towards him. It's more the circumstances and just the fact of the property that they were working with. So when you see the course on the caddy book, the overview, and then when you actually watch players on the course, you kind of realize the sheer size of these fairways. I mean, they're just massive open spaces, and so it's going to lend itself to being pretty much a bomber course. And the thing with courses like that is it's basically disqualifies a lot of the players because there is a pretty big overemphasis on distance. We all know that a really well-designed course has a good diversity of shots. They have a good diversity of holes and everything like that, but with a property like this with so many big fairways and wide open spaces, that's just how it's going to be. It's going to be more overemphasis on distance. And I mean, if you look at the leaderboard, it's all players that can absolutely rip. So my biggest kind of gripe with the course, which I know it's kind of a little picky and specific, and I am not a course designer, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, obviously. One of the things I didn't like was the kind of initial gaps right off the tee. It was something that we've seen on some of these ball golf courses. You saw it at the OTB Open. I remember a few holes like this from the Las Vegas Challenge, and it's these gaps that are just located right next to the tee. And I just don't think they're a challenge for player. It kind of gives the appearance that it's challenging, but it's just not. Another thing I didn't like about the course was the way that the tee pads were changed apparently at the last minute, I guess. And I know this is really no one's fault. I think they were doing the best with the situation that they had, like I said. But the tee pads apparently were causing players leg problems because it's hard to get that on your pivot foot, your plant foot. It's hard to get the rotation on it on these pads. Apparently, the people's legs would just not rotate well, and so they allowed last minute for players to tee off beside the tee pad in a certain area. I'm not exactly sure where, but because of that, it lent itself to a lot of shots that was not the way the course was intended. And it was kind of a funny dynamic. If you watch the round one coverage on Jomez, you see Dustin Keegan, who is the course designer, watching players on his own card play the holes the way they weren't ultimately designed to be played, and then he kind of gave in himself and started doing stuff like that. It was just kind of an interesting dynamic, and it's not that big of a deal, but it definitely changed the way the course was played and how people approached holes. But I did really think there was some good holes. I thought the run of 6 through 8 had some really nice holes. So if you still haven't watched the coverage, and because you just don't want to watch people throwing big rollers or big bombs on a ball golf course all day, go watch holes 6 through 8. I think they're a really great run. And so I want to look at 3 holes specifically that stuck out, that I thought were either well designed, or they had a good range of outcomes, or something. I just saw that hole and I was like, you know what, I like that hole. So we're going to look at 3, and 2 of them are going to be from that little run I talked about. So let's look at hole 6. Hole 6 was a 741-foot par 4. The reason I like this hole was I like the shot shape required off the tee. It was this big, downhill, really pretty anhyzer that I thought was just really fun to watch the disc fly on the drive. After that, you kind of have this tricky approach on these kind of weird sand bunker things. And ultimately, I thought it was just a really well-designed hole. I liked the drive off the tee most. It ended up being the 3rd most difficult hole, but it still held a really wide range of outcomes. On the coverage, if you check out Ricky's drive on the final round, his big anhyzer off the tee was something really special. I thought it was really cool. So the next hole we'll look at is hole 7. It was one of the more popular holes over the weekend, and it's pretty obvious to see why. It is a 1,263 feet par 5. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first drive off the tee. It's kind of just rip it as hard as you can. But the second and third shots require a lot of power and precision and a lot of touch as well. The throw over the pond at the end to an OB guarded green, I think it was a really kind of picturesque moment on the course. And I would say, like others, this was probably my favorite hole on the course. It averaged just over par, and the scores seemed pretty evenly distributed. So the last hole I want to look at is hole 11. It was a 351-foot downhill par 3. I think it was kind of an underrated hole. These are one of the ones I looked at and said, I just like the way this plays. It required a very precise hyzer off the tee to avoid the sand traps and to get a nice birdie. Maybe it's because the course is so long, but I really do kind of like a nice par 3 mixed in there after all the big distance throws. So I really like this one. If you're going back and watching the coverage, check out Kevin Jones on the final round. He had a beautiful park job on hole 11. So let's look at how the tournament actually played out. We're going to briefly look at the top 10 players, how they finished, and then we'll kind of further analyze the top 5. So we had 3 players tied for 10th place, and that was Ben Callaway, Luke Humphreys, and Thomas Gilbert. 9th was James Proctor. 8th position, you had Nico LaCastro, who threw down some really nice rollers this weekend. 7th, we had Simon Lizotte. One thing that I'll mention about Simon is it really can't be understated how impressive he has been since his return. I mean, the fact that he's been on hiatus for so long, I know he's been throwing anyway, he's been, recovering, doing physical therapy and stuff, but the fact that he's back on a big bomber course like this, finishing 7th, and even at one point, I think he might have had the lead. I can't remember exactly, but just, it really can't be understated. And, major props to Simon for his performance this weekend. In 6th place, we had Austin Hannum. Nice to see him up there. And so now we'll kind of get to the top 5 players. We had 2 players tied in 4th position, and the first of those we'll look at is Kevin Jones. So Kevin was only 75% from Circle 1, which was a bit lower than most of the field. He ended with only 2 strokes out of bounds, which was tied for the least in the entire tournament. So he was really keeping things in the fairway. He was staying out of bounds, which was really impressive. It was really fun watching Kevin, especially in the 3rd round. The 2nd round, he was great as well. It's just, there's no more fun disc golfer to watch when they're on fire than Kevin Jones. And he is really, I'm not going to call him inconsistent. I think that he is very consistent. He's one of those players, when he gets hot, he gets really, really hot. And so he was on fire for a while there in the 3rd round. And it goes without saying that hole 15 is kind of what sunk the ship. It especially hurts because he was taking the safe play on hole 15, trying to play for the par, trying to make the smart decision. And yeah, it was pretty heartbreaking to see how things unfolded for him on hole 15. Obviously he was visibly upset after that, but I like his mental recovery. I like that when he threw that, when he missed a couple of those putts on hole 15 and everything kind of went crumbling down, he just kind of smiled and shook it off. And I think that he's going to be back really strong. And obviously, if he would have, just parred that hole, he would have taken down the tournament, which is pretty nuts to think about. So also tied for 4th place with Kevin was Calvin Heimberg. It's just amazing how Calvin always seems to creep his way up the leaderboard in every single tournament that he's in. If you look at his stats, he was solid in every single category. And one of the things that was cool is how he leveled up as the tournament went along. He shot a 63 the first round, a 61 the 2nd round, and a 58, which was the course record, the 3rd round. So tied for 2nd place was Paul Macbeth. Paul was really fun to watch this weekend. He wasn't really crushing off the tee, but his putting was absolutely elite this tournament. He had 10 strokes gained from putting and was 64% from circle 2. So he was lights out putting, and I think that's one of the reasons for his success this tournament. He, along with Calvin, shot the course record in round 3, and if you haven't seen his putt on Gatekeeper's coverage on the final round, hole 18, it was clutch. It was awesome. So check that out. Tied for 2nd with Paul was Ricky. He had really just consistent stats all around the board. He has just been so consistent this year. He had almost 19 strokes gained tee to green, and he was just really solid in all categories. It was, always great to see Ricky up there. And then, of course, our winner, Eagle McMahon. Looking at his stats, nothing especially stands out. He seemed like he was struggling a bit from circle 2 in the final round. But, he was just so good. A solid, 19 strokes gained tee to green. He was consistent. He seemed like he made few mistakes. He threw great drives and putted at a solid rate. One of the things about Eagle is I've heard him mentioned in interviews recently that he's really trying to play safe. He's trying to play smart golf. And when he's doing that on these ball golf courses, I feel like there's no one harder to beat. He's just so consistent. His putting is amazing. His driving is elite. And I think his only weakness is, certain kind of touch shots, certain, kind of mid-range putter approach shots. I think he struggles with sometimes. But, ultimately, he's just been crushing. So that kind of covers a lot of the bases for the 2021 Portland Open. Appreciate you guys watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like. If you'd like to see more of this content in the future from me, please subscribe. I have ideas of ways to improve this channel, of ways to up their production quality, to include more videos and graphics and stuff like that. But we're just getting started right now, just kind of getting the feet off the ground. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a good one. For players.